In my last video, we met the Slaves to Darkness, those warriors who have eternally damned themselves to the service of the Chaos Gods. We went through some possible origins for them and what they warped into, while the forces of Sigmar were locked away in Azir. And in this video, I wanted to really dive into that idea of corruption, right? Who are the Chaos Gods and why would someone choose to follow them? This battle tome is awesome because it gives us a brief intro into each god, right? If you want to know all about Tzeentch, you should go read like the Disciples of Tzeentch book, but if you're someone who's like, I'm not super set on any one of them, I want to just kind of get a broad understanding of what they each are, this is a fantastic resource for that reason. So it gives you a brief intro into each god, but then on the very next page, there's a blurb for each one of them about why people would follow them. In a lot of instances, they do not call the Chaos Gods by their name. They have their own name for these dark deities, right, based on tribal lore or tradition, something like that. We talked about it yesterday a little bit with tribal cultures becoming slaves to darkness. It's not uncommon for the Chaos Gods to have numerous names, for they present themselves to mortals in a myriad of ways. All that matters is that their followers are devoted in the task of spreading disorder and destruction. And with that out of the way, let's dig in. We're going to start today talking about Khorne. Khorne is the god of bloodshed and skulls and murder and war. He is the oldest of the Chaos Gods, because as long as there's been life, one being has sought to kill another. Every act of war, murder, a bloody trophy earned, all of that stuff empowers and strengthens Khorne. Even when the Stormcast slaughter a marauding chaos tribe, Khorne is honored because he doesn't care where the blood flows from, only that it flows. So in a sense, you could say he never truly loses a fight, for even in the slaughter of his own faithful troops, he is pleased. Now, it's not uncommon for Khornate warbands to fall upon each other as well, right? When there's no other worthy opponents out and about, they will duel each other, and this pleases Khorne most of all as it prunes the weak from his ranks. Now, those armies of the Slaves to Darkness that follow Khorne are called the Blood-Marked, typically forming into warbands of 8, as that's Khorne's sacred number. These are Chaos followers that have yet to join the ranks of the Bloodbound, his dedicated army, but they're people who might carry a warrior tradition, or just see Khorne as one of the pantheon of gods to be worshipped. Regardless, nearly all warbands have some god of war that they pray to the evening before a battle. In this way, Khorne is revered by those who have not taken the path of soul devotion. But as long as you're committed to the shedding of blood and the reaping of skulls, Khorne does not mind. What he does mind, however, is magic. He absolutely scorns the use of it, seeing it as a coward's way out of a true fight. What he hates most of all, though, is his brother Slaanesh. The prancing and decadent ways of Slaanesh warbands often send Khornate tribes into a frenzy. And across the realms, Khorne is known by many names, and this battle tome gives you a bunch of different names for each god, and I absolutely love it, where he's known as the Red Hound, the Axe Father, the Brass Belladonna, and the Blood Kraken. But universally, he is a god of war to the endless warbands traveling around in a setting where war and combat are the norm. So you can see why different cultures would all have a reason to revere him in some facet or another. The battlefield is his altar, slaughter is his preferred act of worship, and those of the Blood-Marked are the servants of this faith. And for that, honestly, he's one of the easier ones you can see why a warband would choose to follow Khorne, right? There's a few reasons, right? If you can't beat him, join him, right? If someone's warring and they worship this god and they're super good at fighting and you couldn't beat them, you could opt to join them. And in many of these societies, might makes right. So if the biggest, baddest warband worships Khorne and they absorb you into themselves, you worship Khorne now too. What matters most, though, is that the Blood God's hordes are darn near endless and always looking for a fight. Moving into the next Chaos God, we have Tzeentch. Tzeentch is empowered by hope and the basic desire that we all are able to better our position and see the world changed in certain ways. He is the most perplexing of the Chaos Gods for sure. His plots and schemes are endless, complicated, and often contradictory, as he plays this game with strings of fate. Some plans taking centuries to see completion, others are completed in mere moments. He is a god that plays the most complex game of chess ever, a cause and effect line that goes on to infinity. To this end, there are very few distinct aspects of Tzeentch, and he has more names than any other Chaos God. And this is because his duplicitous nature allows him to appear in more forms than any other, right? Where Khorne is universally a god of war. In some capacity, he could be more honorable or more brutal, but he's about combat at least. Tzeentch can be just about anything to the cultures that he's trying to manipulate, right? He could be the sky god who gives rain to farmers. He could be the fertility god who is prayed to when new parents are trying to bless their child, or a god of light and knowledge and reason. His nature allows him to be all of these things, but only to further his own ends. Many champions have thought themselves the bearer of some great glory or destiny, only to be struck down by one of their own as the schemes of Tzeentch twist and collide and subvert one another. Imagine that you were an evil genius with these grand plans, but you had this compulsive thing where you're always self-sabotaging with the number of plans that you have, and so this is exactly what he is. In addition to that, there is no force in the realms that's allowed for the rapid change that Tzeentch loves than magic. So in short, he is the most magically destructive of all chaos gods, using unbridled power to shape the realms as he pleases. And this magic, of course, comes at a cost, because its bearers are far more likely to receive mutations. Think like a third arm, horns, tentacles, something like that. And this all makes the followers of Tzeentch and the Slaves to Darkness army, the God-touched warbands, very easy to spot. Often forming in increments of 9, which is Tzeentch's favorite number, these disciples of change pour the magic of their deity upon the realms, warping the landscape and themselves a little bit to do so. Now, I wanted to end all of these with talking about why a tribe or kingdom would fall to the worship of these gods, but Tzeentch's ability to be just about anything to anybody means that there's not really a single exact reason. Now, some of the more popular ones that you see in the Tzeentch battle tome is scholars looking for arcane secrets or something like that, but honestly, it's much broader than that. Anything that he can appear to be to get control of you and bring you into his game, he will. There's a lot of tales of honest folks who have been deceived by Tzeentch, right? Thinking they were following the will of some benevolent, life-giving god or pursuing forbidden knowledge for a good reason, only to be revealed that they were pawns in a dark game. And often, for these people, unfortunately, their souls are already forfeit by the time they figure it out. Now, next up is Slaanesh, the god of excess. So, rather than being tied to a specific or emotion or action like the other gods, she is empowered by taking any desire or feeling or act to the extreme. Right? I use the term she, but the truth is, Slaanesh is neither male nor female. It just helps to have a pronoun when you're speaking. In fact, Slaanesh appears as whatever will get you to fall to your deepest urges. Right? Whatever brings out that darkest, most extreme part of you, that's what Slaanesh will look like. And so typically appearing as something very androgynous, right? Some male and female attributes combined. And although Slaanesh is the youngest of the Chaos Gods, the others have a growing concern about her, like a little worry in the back of your mind. And this is because they understand that their obsession with their respective passions feeds Slaanesh. So for example, Khorne being singularly focused on bloodshed feeds Slaanesh in that excess of desire. And there's a lot of valid reason for that concern. It's something that's been cropping up in AOS lore for some time. But there is, luckily for them, one thing that has kept Slaanesh in check. And that's that right now, the throne of the Dark Prince, as she is known, sits empty. Slaanesh was captured by the elven gods Teclis, Tyrion, and Alariel, and also Morathi was there, and imprisoned between two realms, Ulgu and Hysh. And there she is trapped in blissful agony, as the souls of the elves from the old world are pulled out of her. There are rumors that the chains are growing weak. We reviewed those in my dedicated Slaanesh video about how, from the inside, she's breaking out of her own prison bit by bit. That the increasing rise in mortal hedonism is invigorating her once again. And should those chains break, a new kind of horror would be unleashed upon the realms, and the other gods would do well to make sure that that never happens. In fact, in the Hedonites of Slaanesh Battle Tome, they talk about how all the other gods just kind of put little plans in motion to make sure that Slaanesh stays exactly where she is. Now, as far as why any warband or society or culture would follow Slaanesh, it's really not hard to understand why, and honestly, it's one of the ones that's really the easiest to get once you really think about it, is that this setting is full of war and pain and strife, and this means two things. There's a lot of people really obsessed with war, right? It's their reality. They want to craft the best weapons, they want to be the best leaders. They want to, just have a lot of pride or military achievements or be the best personal warrior, one-on-one combat kind of thing. But in addition to that, there's an equal number of people who are super obsessed with finding the tiniest bit of pleasure or respite from this hellscape. Some respite from all the craziness that's going on around them, and this makes it fertile ground for something that's called the pleasure cults of Slaanesh, rotting cities from the inside out as the horrors of daily life push citizens to escapism and indulgent pleasures. This could be anything from a brothel or like a drug den, which are the very clear, very Slaanesh type things, to a gladiatorial pit where people, seek admiration and glory and just a little bit of bloody entertainment that can be taken a little bit too far. You also have your more traditional things, right? Think like gluttony because it makes you feel good, or drinking to excess. Anything like that you can do too much of is fertile grounds for Slaanesh. Anything that you do that is not done in moderation feeds this chaos god. In a world full of struggle and people looking for rest from it, it's just perfect ground for Slaanesh to come in and influence people. Now, last up is Nurgle, right? Powered by despair and entropy, Nurgle is known as the Plague God. His nature is by far one of the more fascinating of the Chaos Gods. He's my personal favorite. I'll spoil that right now. Because he's empowered by hopelessness, right? He presents himself as this joyous god of a kind humor, even though he's all about despair. He calls his home a garden, and he calls all of his followers children. And from that garden, he's constantly brewing all kinds of plagues and diseases, because Nurgle sees himself as a god of life. That when a plague kills one person, thousands of bacteria and spores and all kinds of gross things are born. And that's why he's so jolly. That in the despair and ending of all things, life is happening in abundance, and he gets to bring that life to the realms. He focuses on a cyclical nature, right? Everything is born and dies, and in that death, the cycle repeats itself. His followers embrace this, and Nurgle bestows his gifts upon them. They become fully immune to disease, largely resistant to pain, but in exchange, they look like bloated corpses, writhing with pus and decay. And so it can be really hard for anyone on the outside of a Nurgle warband to understand why you'd ever follow him. And the truth is, this setting is incredibly dark. There are many parts of the realm where there is no hope and no even sliver of a chance of having a good life. Right? The forces of good have never stepped foot in there. There's only isolation and despair. The people here see the entropy and decay of their homelands, and rather than running because there's nowhere to go, they embrace it. They just kind of give up. They fall to that nature and they just kind of give in. And this could be something like a farmer who gives up on keeping his land clean and raises crops in corrupted soil. Slowly it starts to, infect whoever he feeds with that kind of crop and that kind of stuff. Or a town that drinks from tainted water fountains because it's all they have. And all of a sudden everyone's sick and they have to plead out to whatever deity they follow for help. And all of a sudden Nurgle can answer the call. There are numerous ways for life to deal folks a bad hand, and Nurgle thrives in their acceptance of the inevitability and hopelessness, right? Living conditions are generally bad, so sickness seeps in, and slowly an entire society can slide into his grasp. Because they've lost hope of anything getting any better, and they've accepted that this is just what life is, and they embrace it. And when they turn towards that acceptance, they find the open arms of a loving God who relieves the sickness and the worries. Again, it makes sense to those who are in it, but not much sense to anyone else. Now, Nurgle's biggest enemy is Tzeentch, right? Tzeentch is all about change and mutation, but Nurgle is more about the constant cyclical nature of things, waxing and waning. And this nature is kind of exemplified by his followers, the Plague-Touched, who bear his marks in the Slaves to Darkness, but have not yet given themselves or earned entry into the ranks of the Rotbringers. So why is all of this cool? This is the question I always ask at the end of these videos to kind of break it down to be like, there's more going on here than just like reading off of a Wikipedia page. Truth of the matter is, I love the idea of a tribe or a people worshiping one of these chaos gods and not even knowing it. With all the names that they listed off for several of these deities, the idea of, a society who worships like, the spirit of the woods, for example, can easily be like a hidden mask for Nurgle, because it's all about life. It's all about the ebb and flow of the living things. Or how someone's like, God of War, which could be, a very honorable character, is secretly Khorne. And how these beliefs without you even knowing it, can bring you to the darkest places of the realms. In addition to that, I like how each of the Chaos Gods you can really build a worldview around each one of them. Whereas, for example, Nurgle I think is a really easy one where it's a hopelessness, but you have to enjoy life while you have it and you know, grim acceptance of the inevitable. And I dig that. I kind of understand that. You know, stuff like Khorne, where it's like, you know, we have this life, we have to achieve the best that we can. And of course, his method of achievement and his standard of glory is through slaughter. And you can kind of craft, if you're looking at creating a backstory for your warlord based on their mark, you can really flesh out what their motivations are, what their values are, things like that, just on saying they follow blank. Now, I did mention it before, straight up, Nurgle is my favorite one. I'm actually building a Magakin of army right now. And part of it is honestly just on a practical level. I just love the really, really tough, like any army that focuses on toughness, like just being the biggest, baddest thing around. Even if they can't swing hard, just being resilient to damage, I think is really interesting. But if I had to pick a second, I'd probably go Tzeentch. Maybe Khorne. I don't know. The idea, like, tell me what your favorite is. I'm all over the place, but Nurgle is definitely my number one because I love the duality of the grim hopelessness with how jolly he personally is, which is something you don't quite get with the others. They all have their own little unique quirks and personality traits, and I'd love to hear which one you think is the most interesting. So leave a comment down below, and I'll go ahead and I'll chat with you there. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video. Happy wargaming.